GMGM. Welcome to what's going to be another great episode of DevNTell. So, if you didn't know, DevNTell is a 30-minute podcast held every Friday, allowing founders, hackers, and anyone in between to come on the show and showcase what they built. And today I'm ecstatic to welcome Michal, who's founder of both MatterFi and SwissFortress. So, MatterFi is an easy to use fintech infrastructure helping make finance more secure for humans and AI, while SwissFortress is a private universal solution enabling send to name crypto wallets and custody systems meant to combat phishing. So if you stick around for today's episode, you'll see Mehow give us a overview of both MatterFi and SwissFortress, drop some crypto security alpha, and show us how he plans to combat crypto hacking. All right, let's get into it. GM, welcome to the show, Mehow. Pleasure to have you on.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah.
A little pumping intro music.
Oh
I
yeah.
dig it.
Oh yeah. Oh,
You
thank
got
you. Thank you.
you got the Lord of the Rings behind you.
Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings Beyond it. That's right. You know it's going to be a great show, right?
I play D&D a few
Nice.
times a week. I'm running I guess some professionally DM groups. Just
Oh, right on.
I love it. But I started playing in the '80s, and then just like recently, I started doing it again. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
like awesome. It's way better than the first edition, I would say. The
Oh yeah.
2024 5. I don't know. Do you RPG?
I haven't played D&D, but I did used to RPG, video game wise back in the day. But yeah, I've heard lots of great things about it.
I mean, it's way better than computer games for you, I think.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
'cause I
yeah,
used to be like a hardcore gamer, and it just, yeah, it's not healthy. Like, I just
yeah,
don't think computer games are healthy in general. They're just like, they get you anxious and twitchy. And I know a lot of, like,
oh yeah,
so many people are into it, but ultimately it's just this highly addictive sort of
yeah,
thing. And then, the great thing about just regular, like, human to human gaming is that it can, you can't game all night. Like, you can't do stuff
yeah.
all night, right?
The
Like,
game has to end.
and
The game
right,
has to end.
and it's like, way more sort of like, I think, healthy for your mind. But yeah, I was just curious because you're like, your background is obviously
Oh yeah,
ultra nerd, so
yeah.
I had
Ultra.
I
Yes,
I
yes.
had to ask. Um,
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So I guess when you're not cooking up a storm on the D&D table,
I'm not.
yeah, yeah,
I'm not the cook. I'm the
yeah.
player. I don't like cooking. I've never liked DMing because it's kind of like I'd rather just enjoy like really good,
Right.
like a really good adventure-driven narratives that So I'm like very picky with my DMs. Like they
Yeah,
have to
as you should.
be like the best. So I have
As
a
you
few
should.
that are just like phenomenal storytellers and just way never been into like running games. Um,
Amazing.
I just
Uh,
I
yeah,
just min max the tunes, but yeah, just like how I min
yeah.
max the software.
Yeah, there you
Those of you
go.
that
There
are
you
super geeky are just like, yeah, you get what that means. But
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess you also have quite the love for combating crypto security with you founding both MatterFi and SwissFortress. But before we get into that, you kind of revealed some of the lighter side of Mehow, but do you want to do a brief introduction for the technical side of Mehow as well?
Sure. So, I've been a hacker since I was 15. I started on the IBM PC Junior. And I've been like coding basically my whole life, mostly with a security focus. So like the first three companies that I worked for all got bought. And then after that I stopped working for companies. So like I was the first chief technology officer of IntelliBridge.us, which is a DC based intelligence software company essentially that also does, some security work. And they're still around. I was there like early 2000s, so I was like the first one, employee number 5 or something, or 3 even. And then I worked at Cigital and LECG, which were both software security houses. So we did some of the early pioneering work in software security and white hat hacking, where we would be hired by either the government or some corporation to um, essentially analyze their software from a white hat point of view by looking at the code to find all the vulnerabilities, quickly. So what that got me into is like, how do you build software that's like hyper secure, right? And then where that ended up in crypto is that when crypto came out, like the hackers, the black hats were like, yay, all the money's online now. Like before it was just like, yeah, we're gonna do some viruses, like viruses were like a big deal where it might eat your machine, but it didn't, like go and steal a ton of money, for example, right? Like not directly. Like maybe there was ransomware, maybe there was some data theft, right? That data got resold. Like something that was really common was like credit card data being resold. But obviously the stakes are way higher when the actual money is digital, right? And then that's why we've seen this huge you know culture of theft and fraud. It's almost tolerated, right? It's like none of these people really ever go to jail. They just steal, and it's normal. Like, oh, if you got fished or scammed in crypto, that like happens to everybody. Like, um, so we've kind of just got to this place where we just accept it. We just say this is a known risk with the space, and if you're in the space, you gotta be more clever than the hackers. And obviously that's a from so my personal mission is to create safety, accessibility, and trust, because I just don't want people to get robbed. I mean, and the other problem is, like, obviously when you have that sort of environment where, like, like the first thing a new user in crypto thinks is like, okay, how do I not lose my money? Like that's their main thing that they think about because of the broken environment. Like, how are we going to get new users? Like, how are we going to get past you know guys with Lord of the Rings in their background, and dudes playing D&D, right? Like, how is it going to go past us? Like, because it's just, right now what we're attracting is like geeks, because you have to be a geek to survive. Like, if you don't understand what's going on, then, you're likely to lose funds and whatnot, right? So, and then the sort of mainstream popularity of it, like ETFs and stuff, they're really, that's not actually decentralized anything. That's just, translating crypto into something that somebody can understand, but without this, but the problem like an ETF solves for a Bitcoin investor is it solves their security problem for them, right? They're like, well, if I trust, like, my Wells Fargo or my, savings account or my, IRA or whatever to hold my funds, then clearly I'm cool with an ETF because it's the same level of risk, right? So, um, like, yeah, but that's not actually fixing the problem. That's just kind of working around the problem. So that's why I started MatterFi. So SwissFortress is a client of MatterFi that it was kind of like one of our marquee clients. I am a co-founder at SwissFortress, but all the tech is made in America. And again, the other reason we started in Switzerland was just because of regulatory. There will be a American version of that product coming out fairly soon. I have to, which will be cool. Um, and these are things that sort of just kill the phishing and make crypto super easy to use. It's like decentralized PayPal or Zelle or Venmo for all of crypto, right? So it's like just an instant payment system. You pick whatever digital currency you want and you send to a name, and it just works, and everything is decentralized, and the addresses are computed automatically, and who your counterparty is, but no one else knows that, like, you sent the money or how much money they have, or anything, right? So it's like fully private, decentralized, PayPal for all the crypto. If I was asked to summarize in what I call Vitalik speak, which is like, because Vitalik never just tells you what the feature does. He always just says, this this spec and that spec, and as technical as possible, right? So in Vitalik speak, it's auto-computed stealth address via one-way non-interactive cryptographic proof that's tied to names, thereby making it super easy to use and guaranteeing privacy on all the chains and tokens that the tech supports, which is basically everything. Like, and at this point, we're actually getting adoption on most of the majors, I would say. So there's, if you have a favorite chain, it's likely I'm already adding the tech to that chain. Um, so yeah, it's that's the sort of summary. where I came from and why I'm here.
That's amazing. And yeah, like when you were mentioning only the nerds can use it, I was gonna say like even the nerds have their problems. Like whenever you're transferring a decently large chunk of money from one wallet to another, like I don't know about you, but I like triple, quadruple check the address to make
No,
sure
no,
like, oh yeah, it's
and you
like
do a test transaction, right? And
yeah,
it's like, and if
for
you're
like a
depositing,
dollar or something.
yeah, if you
Yeah,
deposit the Kraken, like first you're checking that Etherscan address, and then you're like making sure the balance shows up in Kraken, and then you send the main funds. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So, um, yeah,
yeah,
that's what I, it's broken even for super nerdy people. So like the
that's right.
Bybit hack, for example. I mean, that's Benny from Bybit, CEO. I believe it's the second biggest exchange on earth, and he signed the wrong transaction because he doesn't know how to read hex, right? And it's like, if he falls for it, then you will too, right?
Yeah,
So that said, they had, very highly funded state sponsored hackers going after them. But the problem that happened at Bybit is, extremely, it affects everybody, right? That's just sort of like, a fringe example, a min-maxed example, maxed example of like how much money can be stolen when, somebody's really, really dedicated to exploiting the same vulnerability that affects everybody every day for lower amounts. So yeah, what else? Which way do you want to go? Do you want me to show you the tech? Talk about the Bybit hack? Talk about security in general? Um,
yeah, yeah. Before we get into uh, the nitty-gritty of what you have prepared, kind of wanted to touch a little bit more on the security and just kind of find out like, was there any type of security hack that you might have unfortunately fallen for that kind of continued to inspire your journey to founding MatterFi and SwissFortress? I know you've had quite a tenured experience in security, but I'm sure you have some nice quote unquote war stories around it.
I mean, for me, it's really hard to fall for a hack. I'm usually the one that's exposing the hack, but I wouldn't say there's any particular war story. I think the big story is that all the war stories are really the same story. It's generally phishing, and in crypto anyway, it's generally phishing. Either sending you to a website that's asking you to essentially give up your wallet credentials, or sending to a website that's asking you to send funds to an address you don't know, right? And or pretending to be something else and asking you to send funds to an address you don't know, or tricking your device into giving control of, let's say, a smart contract to an address you don't know. so, so as you can see, this, ultimately it's some combination of steal your keys or address you don't know. But even the go to the website thing, even that doesn't sound like it's address you don't know problem, right? Because initially they're not like, hey, by the way, randomly just send money to this thing because we're Binance, and if you do, then you're going to make all this cash, right? Like, they're not doing that. They're doing that and say, they gotta somehow get you interacting with you, right? So, but like Telegram hacks, and Telegram group hacks and Telegram scams, which are they're always about this. It's like, send this funds here because we're a terrific trading group and we'll trade for you. But when you try to pull the funds out, then there's nothing there because obviously they already spent it eons ago, right? So, but ultimately, even the web hacks, like, the reason they exist is because there is no easy way for wallets to connect to custody, in any sort of like native protocol. Like, you have to use this web interface, and then you have to receive an address, and then you're mathematically guaranteed to not know that address, who that address belongs to. 100% of the time, right?
Right.
Like, it's literally trust me, bro accounting. It's like we have this amazing decentralized crypto where, like, okay, once the address is correct, then everything is infallible. But for some reason, knowing whether the address is correct or not is mathematically impossible, right? Like literally, it's just okay, this is a person I trust, and then therefore they give me the address, because the only person that knows that address is correct is the guy that generated it. The second you give it to somebody, now that person has no direct proof that it's yours or in fact anybody's. They don't know whose it is. because there's no off-chain crypto proof that ties that address to an identity in a way that preserves privacy, right? And that's what we, that's the problem we solved. So like for me, it's not one story. It's that all the stories ultimately have to do with the same thing, which is that the fundamental architecture of how we use cryptocurrencies is still broken, and it's been 15 years since the Satoshi white paper. So this is a problem that has to get solved. And now, I mean, there is a big narrative coming. So Vitalik just posted about this a week ago. It's like, hey, by the way, guys, let's start throwing in privacy, right? So I can break down kind of like what he's talking about, because he wrote a blog post, and the first thing was like start using mixers, and the second point was have a new address for every application. Well, that's exactly what our software does. It's like for every two people that interact, you have a new address that gets generated, and it's automatically tracked. And that address, to compute that address, you have to have the private key of either the sender or receiver. Ergo, it's decentralized. Ergo, no one knows what the address is. So, like if I'm sending money to NARB, then I compute, your say BCH or Ethereum or Casper or whatever address as X. Now, if somebody else is sending money to you using still your same name, NARB, they'll compute a different address, Y. And the person computing X cannot know Y, and vice versa. And that applies to the whole world, meaning that there is no central database of receive addresses anywhere. So then when you combine that, so that solves Vitalik's second point, which is freaking awesome, because we're the only people that have it working in a sane way. There's been a few other attempts at doing this, but they've all sort of either commercially or just technically failed. And obviously the centralized approach of like, here's a master list of addresses, and you got to put your address in here. That only works if the entire chain is shielded. But then the other problem is all the shielded means that like third party users don't know, who sent it. They can't see the essentially like an ether scan doesn't exist in those places, right? So if you have a shielded transaction like that, but very few chains support that. And then even then, you still got to deal with the address, like who's the address, right? Now, if you have a static database, everybody sends the same address. So even if the transaction's shielded, you as the recipient still don't know where the money came from, right? so so that's a huge problem, because then like the accounting is like a year later, you're like, oh man, I mean, if you got a report, like you want a log that looks like PayPal, or export my account history, and what you get is if you export your account histories, you get a bunch of addresses, and then you have to explain every single one. It's not
Oh,
tenable,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's not tenable, right? So we're in this unique place where all of a sudden the privacy is the meta, and we've actually been working on the privacy and but more importantly, the ease of use. For I've been doing this for 5 years, at this company for 3, because MatterFi bought 2 other companies before, to create the tech. And then I raised all the money, got most of the customers, built the team, and wrote 9 patents. The only thing I don't really do is code, but I do a lot of the architecture. So not any. I mean, I used to code a lot, but not at this job in particular.
Right.
So I think that's the answer to what's the big story. The big story is that all the stories are the same story.
That's that's a wonderful answer. And yeah, I mean, like everybody's seen all the stories come up on their Twitter X feeds. It's like you say, usually the same thing over and over.
Every other
Um,
day, yeah, new
every other
hack.
day. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New hack. How many millions got stolen today? So right,
this
so
this
this is
time.
like, and the other side of it is like the custody hacks, right? So what the custody hacks do is they amplify the brokenness of the system. And that's the other thing I can talk about, because we do have another thing that's not sent to name, that when you combine with sent to name makes custody super safe. So really, like, the big theft is always a combination of, like Bybit essentially, it's fooling the signers into, because they have no sent to name and no clear cryptographic proofs for their cold wallets. Meaning like there's no sign that says, okay, hey Benny from Bybit, you're transferring from wallet named X to wallet named Y, right? and you're the signer and the other two signers are so and so, and like everybody's, identities revealed to that signer but not to the public, right? Like if that was the case, then every time you had a normal operation, that's what would happen in that cold wallet transfer. But then what the hackers did is they sent essentially what was, from the wallet's point of view, a random signature request for a random DeFi call, right? Which just replaced the code in the contract with the attacker's code, just based on one parameter being changed. Then the payload was obviously different because the payload was actually this new code. But it all looked like, the regular hex that they typically do. Now in our system, that wouldn't be the case, right? If they were using that, it wouldn't be the case. But they, and then if the attacker, ran into our system while they're trying to execute that same hack, the ledger would just say, hey, this is a random contract call. You probably shouldn't sign in unless you're 100% confident that this hex is secure, right? So obviously, as a user, if like your regular thing says transfer from A to B, sign here in plain English, right? And that's the actual cryptographic proof, meaning like nothing else can happen. Like the only thing that can happen when you sign that is that maybe the message doesn't make it to a node and nothing happens, but the money is not stolen, right? So, in that reality, we would have defeated them, and that speaks to off-chain crypto proofs, which not only can you use them to create this sort of send to name scheme, which is a combination of on and off-chain crypto proof. It's really what I would call a side chain crypto proof, not side because it doesn't use a chain, but outside the chain crypto proof that's using some on-chain metadata to create this 100% accuracy of like who you're interacting with, right? So that's how we do it. But if you have full off-chain crypto proofs in your custody system, now you don't need signers at all on the custody side. So you don't need people with keys just sitting there like approving transactions and signing things. Like it's just not necessary. And I can explain why that is. So now you don't have the vulnerability at all of like the inside job, right? So now like things like FTX and Mt. Gox, although still possible in our system, they're way less likely because you can create essentially ceremony around the keys that makes the OPSEC extremely easy because there aren't like a million people in your organization every day with the keys to the money. And that's like the thing that the, Lazarus group, which is again Wazir, Femex, Bybit, obviously, and a million other things they're constantly exploiting. They're like, well, I'm going to fool those, 2 out of 3 guys or 3 out of 5 guys, or whoever, whatever the multi-sig sharding sharing scheme is. Um, so that's the other story is that, and that's something that's very esoteric people don't understand, is that we use crypto proofs all the time on chains. Like if you're signing a transaction for Bitcoin, then there isn't like some guy sitting on the Bitcoin miner approving your transaction, right? Or like having to whip out his share of the key. From a geek's point of view, I'm talking about Shamir's secret sharing, which is generally the architecture used for multi-party computation schemes where you have like X out of Y people signing a transaction. So, but no one has to whip out their share on that crypto miner. It just receives a crypto proof and it's like, oh, okay, everything's valid, correct. I'm just going to process the transaction. So why isn't custody work that way? Right? Why do you
Yeah.
need people running custody? And the answer is not because you have to have them. It's because the thing that's holding your money at Fireblocks or BitGo or any of these things today completely has no idea who you are, what your wallet is. It's like essentially just a giant, custodial wallet. It's like a wallet for the institution, but it has no relationship to your funds, right? Just like it doesn't know if your withdrawal address is correct. It certainly doesn't know what your like cryptographically what your intention is. So what we did is we made it so that like if you deposit your funds to an exchange, it actually goes to a name first of all, like say Brinks is one of our partners, so we're deploying this custody system at Brinks. um, you deposit to a name, the name has a KYC proof, so and all this happens in wallet. There's no Web3 in this scenario at all because you don't need it anymore. So now that whole layer of like, oh, by the way, this is the real website, or go here, blah blah, it's like if you just take away go to this website for to do the fintech that you want, then the attackers can't leverage that anymore because it's just not part of the user's mental model. Like the user is just like, well, why would I go to a website? I don't do that anymore, right? I just send money to a name, and then I interact via this protocol inside my wallet with what I want to do with that money, and everything's an end-to-end crypto proof, right? So like in our system, what happens is the user, the same set of keys that's used to manage your funds online is used to manage your funds offline. So like you just tap your hardware wallet card. So here's like one of our hardware wallet cards for another customer. You tap this and you can say, all right, now I want to say bid ask, or I want to withdraw, or I want to transfer to another user instantly off chain. And the hardware security module understands that. So the message from you to the thing controlling your funds in custody is just a straight cryptographic message from point A to point B. There, you don't, and when you do that, you don't need people to operate that hardware security module at all. Like it can
Pretty neat.
ask people like, hey, this transaction's over 10K, needs human review. That's great. But now that human doesn't need to have the keys to anything. So now your entire security and ops problems just reduced to like you have backup keys and they're in actual deep cold storage. So the Korean hackers have to break into your safe somehow or to your HSM somehow. Now note that in none of the Lazarus cases has there been a break into the hardware security module. It's always been exploiting the people with the shares. So
Right. Yeah.
so essentially, when you do that, you solve that problem. And the other thing is, how do you solve like FTX or Mt. Gox or these inside jobs with that? Well, if like you have a company and it's a custodian and this is the policy that no one's running around with keys, the keys are always in the safe. It's way harder to do an inside job without, anybody knowing what happened. Like at FTX, it's just like, we don't really know who absconded with the money because they had a bunch of yahoos, running around with keys as part of the thing. So now they get to say that. But in my system, they don't get to say that. It's like, for it to work, you don't need a bunch of yahoos running around with keys. It doesn't. The system doesn't require that. So this is a way to make essentially insurability of digital assets way higher. It makes it so that inside jobs are way harder, and it makes it so that outside hacking is well nigh impossible in custody. So it's kind of like the ultimate WASI-REX, Femex, Bybit, Lazarus Group, Kim Jong Un, Rocket Man, ballistic missile funding program, killer.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. And yeah, I'd love to see all of this in action. I know you have like a little demo
Yeah, um,
prepped.
I do. So let me just share a screen real quick. So,
Sure.
and unfortunately today we have an issue with our Ethereum accelerator. So I can send ETH, but I can't see balances. I'm going to show this to you on BCH. It's basically the same thing, but like right now, if you download the beta wallet, you're going to run into that bug. So here we go. Let's do window first. Okay, so I'm sharing this one. So you see, it looks like a regular wallet, right? So I can go in here and like
Hmm.
generate a receive address. Um, but that's not what we want you to do. What we want you to do is use send to name. So here, like I said, there's a bug right now where I'm not getting Ethereum transaction history, but if you go into BCH, you see it working, right? So like every transaction is to and from a name. So if I want to just send an asset, like I want to send rider, let's do one testnet BCH, and this is just another username of somebody I know. Now all I have to do is just spell that correctly. It's case insensitive, meaning capital R and little r is still the same user. We did that deliberately, so like you don't have people essentially trying to steal from each other by exploiting like that. Oh, you sent to the lower other capitalization, therefore your money's mine. Ah ha ha ha. Right. But anyway, to send the crypto, you just hit that. You just type in the name and hit next. That's it. And this works. This is the same name for all chains, right? So if I want to send Ethereum, um, I already sent the crypto, right? So if I want to send Ethereum or any other asset, I still just use the same name, right? So that's why I say, it's cross chain or it's multi chain. Then when you add like atomic swap DeFi, and then you have cross chain sent to name. So that's one of the things that we're also going to be rolling out with clients, right? So all this is white label. So like SwissFortress is a customer of MatterFi. There will be a MatterFi operated wallet in America though, because the political environment has now changed, and now it's okay to release this stuff. So like looking at it on chain, let me just change the share to full screen. here. Uh, duh, 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 duh. Wow, screen. Hold on, it's not giving me. It's giving me attitude. It just worked, like we just tested it. Oops, there we go. Screen share this screen. Okay, now you see the whole screen, right? So let me just get rid of us from the background, right? So if I take like, let's go to as you can see, we got this particular wallet. Like it's one of our big test wallets, or my personal test wallet. It has hundreds of tens of thousands, not ten, thousands of transactions. So like just on this one chain, I have 2,400 test transactions. So yeah, it works, right? So like if I, hold on, let me look at this transaction. Yeah, to Rider. If I pull up Explorer, you'll see. So how much is the transaction for? It was like for 3 testnet BCH. So let's see. We should see yeah. So here it is, right? This is the 3 testnet BCH, and you see this address. So how does my wallet know that this is Ryder's address? Um, and then normally this address would be in some central, like, okay, so let's run through the typical scenarios. Is there some central service like Proton's, Bitcoin sent a name that stacks a bunch of your addresses and then hands it out to wallets as they requested? The answer is no. The problem with that is obviously whoever controls that, whoever hacks into that now can reveal everybody's balance, but if they control it, they can just steal money, right? So you don't want a central database. Is it, friend.tech is the same thing. So there was that friend.tech hack a year ago where like all of a sudden, 100,000 people's XIDs were tied to how much money they have, which now makes them, huge targets for hackers. Because now the hackers have all this metadata they can use to then target this person and exploit them essentially via, again, phishing of some sort typically. So that's really bad. Fireblocks network, the biggest complaint Fireblocks network users have, to me anyway, is that, hey, I can look up everybody else's balance because they have names inside of Fireblocks network. And now, like, if you're a custodian, you can just see how much the other guy processed today, which is, if you're like a trading house, not great, obviously, right? If your ENS are unstoppable, then I can trivially look up your balance. Like in all these cases, essentially, most of them, um, you can look up somebody's balance if the address is static. If the address is not static, there is some centralized thing computing it for you. So your Fluid Key has that issue, right? So what is this? This is a stealth address, meaning that it's an address that only the 2 parties know. Like you can see it on chain, like you can see it in this block, but no one knows that this is Mehow sending to Ryder, and no one can possibly know that mathematically unless they're Mehow or Ryder, because they need Mehow or Ryder's private key to compute this address to know that this belongs to us. So there's a central database of, it's actually, I'll call it not central. It's a both centralized and decentralized database of the names and the metadata that's used to compute these things. But from that database, all you get is just a list of the users and their names, but you can't correlate to anything that they're doing. You don't see any, like, you don't know if they're using it a lot, using it a little, sending money on which chain. Like, none of that's possible. Timing attacks are also not possible. So you just don't know, right, at all, right? And this is the only such system in the world, and that's why we're fairly proud of it, because despite all this technical complexity, to the user, it's just, hey, I just sent money, to a name. That's it. So under the hood, I have all this crazy tech going. Um, and this is about to be the metadata. The first host is Meta, is going to be Polygon. The second host is ICP. So we're like onboarding chains, and we're getting all the major projects essentially to use this in some form. We're working with MetaMask. We're working with Midnight, Cardano, Hedera, Arbitrum. Obviously, BCH, some BTC L2s. But it supports all the L2s plus L1, right? So like you can, inside this wallet, within the next 6 months, you can expect to see a lot more chains. Like today, we support Dash, eCash, Lite, BCH, BTC, Ethereum. One old customer of ours was Casper, was actually one of the very first customers. Used to be a fairly famous project, but then they rug pulled all their investors, so they're not that famous anymore. But they did invest heavily in us early on, and we made a really cool wallet for them. So that's that. And then the other thing I can show you is just so the custody system inside this wallet's not enabled because we're still working on the alpha, but I can show you a diagram. Let me just pull up the one of our decks here, and I'll show you
Sure.
a diagram of like exactly the stuff I was talking about. Give me 1 second.
I guess as you're pulling it up, just a quick question from me. So every time, so if you were to send another test BCH to Grider, would the computed address be the same every time? The one in between?
So that's a setting. And what we're
Yeah.
going to do in production is just make it the same address because there's like in right now in our beta wallet on the Bitcoin based, the UTXO based chains, we generate a new address every time because there's no spend penalty to that. But it's not really useful and it creates more compute burden on the clients, right? So it's like as if you're sending a new address every time. Say on Ethereum, and you receive 100 transactions on Ethereum, and once to every you have essentially have 100 accounts, even though all that money's coming from the same person. Then when you try to spend that money, that the fees are higher, right? So it's not really useful. And given that the first address is already super private, like the only way anybody's going to know is if they grab your keys. There is really not a whole lot of point to using a new address every time. So that's something that's getting disabled in production because it just creates extra computational burden. But here's the Bybit hack breakdown. So like I said, there is essentially you've got these single shares, like each
Oh,
in
you haven't, yeah,
oh,
you
it's
haven't shared.
let me
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
let me hit share screen. Wow, share the screen. Cool. So this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
my Bybit hack breakdown. So obviously one of the problems is the random address problem, which we already talked about a lot, right? Like you don't know either in custody or in person to person or person to robot, AI to AI. No one really knows who the address belongs to that they've been given, right? So we solved that problem. So that's like it right away. Half the hacking be gone. The other problem we solve is the problem of these humongous thefts, which is that you generally have people with keys, say 2 out of 3, they have key shares, and the policy engine may also have some key shares, and the HSM has some key shares, and in when you combine X out of Y, you can magically just spend all the money, and this happens a lot of times a day because that's how withdrawals get processed, right? So what we do in our system is we get rid of that. Like there's no people here. And then even in the cold wallet where you may have people because, even when you use our system, this is still probably a good idea to have a hot and the cold. The cold wallet uses end-to-end crypto proofs. Therefore you know, the Rocket Man hackers can't do the heist that they did. And then the way the custody system works is right here. You see there's no people in this diagram. It's say 3 out of 5 nodes, but the nodes are the only thing that have the shares. There's no people with shares except the backup share in case like a server goes completely belly up and you just got to restore it. So like in our system, the only times you got to touch the keys as a person is if you're reloading new firmware or the server blows up, which is ideally, these things almost never happen, right? It's very rare, once a quarter, once a month. So when you have um, the ability for these things to happen once a quarter, once a month, now like a regulator can be part of your key system. So that's how you prevent an inside job, right?
Right.
Like it's all of a sudden possible that like you could actually have a third party that is part of your key ceremony, which radically reduces the risk. Um, and so, and then we use end-to-end crypto proofs at all the steps. So like when you deposit to a name, you get a off-chain crypto proof back to straight to your wallet. It says, okay, you just deposited, 10 BTC. Now, what do you want to do with it? Maybe in step 2, you want to, exchange it for Ethereum because say this is an exchange that's using our system, right? Say it's Coinbase or something, right? So now you whip out your hardware card, you tap, and an off-chain crypto proof gets sent to the hardware security module, and it's like, oh, this is Mehow, exchanging this for this, so I'm just going to do it. No people required. And then the third step, I'm going to sign again an off-chain instrument, which we obviously just call it withdrawal. That's like literally what it's called in our documentation. And When I do that, the HSM receives the withdrawal and says, "Oh, this is Mehow doing the withdrawal," and all the other servers also receive the same request, and they're like, "Okay, this is Mehow doing the withdrawal. Therefore, I can sign the multi-party computation to release these funds back to Mehow." And by the way, he has Ethereum, so how do I know what address to send? I know his name, so now I can compute his Ethereum address without asking him. So you can see how this is like far more secure, right? So that's the mission of MatterFi. We make software wallets, hardware wallets, AI agents, custody systems. We just make fintech, way more secure for people. And it's part of my personal mission to create safety, accessibility, and trust, because you can also attach like identities and names like KYC proofs and whatnot. But now I'm getting like pitchy and technical, and I really just want you to ask me questions. So, but that's the stuff that I was like planning on sharing.
Wonderful. And yeah, I mean, we're we've gone over time, but that's fine. I guess a couple questions from me is a how can people get started with Swiss Fortress? Is there a like what's the sign up process like? Do they have to pay to use it?
Yeah, so SwissFortress is, the only thing you have to pay for is the name. In production and beta, it's totally free. So like the beta names, it's a separate setup than the production. So if you go to SwissFortress.com, you can go to launch.swissfortress.com and like reserve your name for when we're in production. We anticipate being there in like 3 months roughly. We're basically doing like I said, the infrastructure work right now with some of the key providers that have given us grants to basically hold the infra on their ecosystem. And there is a L3 token that we have called Fortress Coin, but the users don't have to know anything about that. Like it's not like the traditional DeFi method would be like, if I come up with something cool, every time you use it, you got to give me buy more of my token, right? And that just makes it super clunky. So we do have that token in the background, and it's used to secure the metadata and compensate, the L2s for securing it, yada yada. But the user does not have to know. Like the user just buys a name. Ultimately, the price target for names is $10 a year, and for $10 a year, you get essentially what is, unless you're super high volume, unlimited decentralized send to name, like I just described. So, you know, um, it replaces banking, it replaces payment systems, it replaces, everything, and it's incredibly affordable, right? So that's the business model at Swiss Fortress. To get in on the beta, we have like a Zeely campaign. We have rewards. You can earn some token for helping us find bugs. You can download the beta. All that's at SwissFortress.com. And then, MatterFi, which is the company that created it, definitely pay attention to the X for the announcements that are coming, because they'll be pretty big with some really big partners that, about as big as partners can get on planet Earth today. We hope that the adoption for us in the last 5-6 weeks since ETH Denver, because the project kind of went viral in ETH Denver, and then we got some really good partners like DNA Fund, Michael Turpin, Lunar Digital Assets. So they were the guys that made Polygon famous. Did all their marketing, did their first launch and everything. So they wrote the light paper. So we have a really good team like promoting the thing now. So what's happening is that there's a lot of adoption for the tech happening on the back end, and as these things become official and we're near in production, you're going to see a lot more news about like hey, you can ideally 6 months from now, like most of the major wallets on Earth, can use send to name, and then there's also a bunch of other wallets that all use this Fortress name standard, which is what we're calling it to send and receive crypto and run your custody. So that's the answer to how you get involved. And you can find all that on MatterFi.com, SwissFortress.com, or in our X accounts.
Awesome. And yeah, all that is linked in our YouTube description below. And then my final question was around the roadmap for MatterFi, but you kind of dropped the hint at some alpha that you got some big partners in the pipeline coming along.
Yeah, I mean
So
the
yeah,
roadmap right now is to just get to production. Like we're at a place where the beta is essentially done, and now we're like fully decentralizing it, because the beta is partially centralized, partially decentralized. Now we're just fully decentralizing it. So like even if I have this problem that I have today, which is I can't get balances, um, it shouldn't affect anything. But that doesn't mean like Like if there's a infrastructure problem with Infura or any of these things, it doesn't mean you lost your money. It just means that you can't see how much you have like right this particular second. So uh, so like I mean these are all like we don't for our accelerators for Bitcoin are actually probably the best in the world, but to make that sort of UTXO level of privacy and then redundancy and apply it to an EVM chain is actually a ton more work net, which I hope to get to, but it's sort of like secondary priority. And what you're seeing with that bug today is essentially exactly that. It's that Ethereum uses Infura, whereas Bitcoin uses decentralized accelerators, right? There is no like master RPC system that somebody can sit on and like see what you're doing. So we solved that problem as well. But yeah, the roadmap right now is just get to production with both the custody system and the wallets, and then get as much adoption as possible. Finish our Series A, and then just grow. And my mission is just get as much adoption for the MatterFi tech as possible for Fortress names in general, obviously.
Amazing, amazing, and yeah, like you've built a really great product from what you demonstrated and what you spoke about, and it does solve a legitimate problem. One of the biggest problems beyond just UX for crypto,
Yeah, exactly.
keeping people's money safe,
Yep.
and that's what majority of people want. So, really looking forward to seeing the product hit production. And yeah, just want to thank you again, Michal, for taking the time to come on the show today. I felt like we could have gone on for another hour or two. So really engaging talk.
Awesome. Thanks, Narb. Great chatting with you, and chat soon. Peace. Bye.
Yeah. All right. And for folks who have watched us live, I'm going to drop a link for you to claim your Bit Badges collectible. So if you are into that kind of thing, definitely keep that or check that out. And with that, just want to wish everybody a very happy Friday, happy weekend, wherever you may be, and we will catch you back here for another great episode of DevNTell next week. All right, all. Have a good one.